Hello again for day 2 of line graphs. So if you could make sure that you have your textbook available and a whiteboard or a sheet of paper to work on, we're going to continue looking at line graphs and how to interpret them and just some different questions that we can answer based on reading and interpreting a line graph. So please turn to page 52 in your textbook. So we're going to be looking at two graphs today, two line graphs, and the first one is just number 1. You can see up here. It is a line graph. Let me read what it says in number 1. It says the line graph shows the number of people in a supermarket by the hour from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Use the graph to answer the questions which follow. So let's first just look at the graph itself before we even look at the questions. Let's see what we're looking at here. So the bottom of the graph shows me that I have different hours in the day, starting with 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And then the vertical line shows me the number of people that are in the grocery store at those specific times. So we start at 0. And every other line is increasing by 50. So if this is 0 and this is 50, then the line halfway between them would be 25. So 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, 225, and 250. So you can see that it never went above, certainly not above 250. So you can get a quick look at that and you can tell immediately which hour had the most number of people in the grocery store. That was obviously 8 p.m. And you can see that 10 p.m. over here on the far right of your graph here had 0 people. So what could you conclude there? It's not a question on the paper or on the book, but you could probably conclude that's when they closed at 10. They had no people in the store, which would make sense. Okay. And you can also see that 5 p.m. had the lowest number of people during the hours that it was open. So what other kinds of information would we be asked to interpret on a line graph? Well, let's see. A says, what was the increase in the number of people from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.? Okay, so to answer this question, we're going to go ahead and find 7 p.m. and we're going to go up to the dot and see where it intersects on the vertical line to find out how many people were in attendance at 7 p.m. at this grocery store. So at 7 p.m., obviously it's halfway between 100 and 150, so we know that that's 125 people at 7 p.m. So I'm just going to write that down. There was 125 people at 7 p.m. And then at 8 p.m., the number jumped up, you can see, to 200 people. So it went from 125 to 200 people. So to find out the increase, certainly all we do is just subtract 125 from 200. And you know that, that's mental math. You can do that mentally. And you know that there was an increase in 75 people from 7 to 8 p.m. So that would be my answer for A. Okay. For B, what was the decrease in the number of people from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m.? So obviously you can look and see that the number of people in the grocery store at 8 p.m. was pretty high, but then it went down pretty sharply by 9 p.m. So we want to know by how much did it decrease. So let's start with 8 p.m. We can see here that the dot tells us that there were 200 people in attendance or at the grocery store at 8. And then at 9, that number dropped down to 100 people. So I'm just going to subtract and I'll see that there was a decrease in 100 people from 8 to 9 p.m. That's pretty straightforward. Okay. All right, that is the first question. Let's move on to the second question on this page. So I'm going to erase this, move up to the second graph, which shows a totally different set of information. Let's see what it shows. It says, the line graph shows the weekly sales of furniture made by a company during a 4-week trade fair. Use the graph to answer the questions which follow. Okay, so let's just see what we're looking at here. Okay, so on the bottom of the graph here, we have the weeks of this trade fair. The first week of the fair, the second week, the third week, and the fourth week, which must have been the last. And then we have, vertically here on the left, we have the amount in dollars that the company made during this 4-week period. So for the first week, you can see that they made $100,000. And you can also glance and see that, you know, every other major line is increasing by 100,000. So if this is 0 and this line is 100,000, then the halfway point here would be 50,000, right? 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, 250,000, 300,000. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Now let's see what questions they're asking us. A says, the weekly sales decreased from 200,000 in the third week to 50,000 in the fourth week. What was the decrease? Well, this is really similar to the question we just answered a moment ago with the other graph about the grocery store. So yes, we can see that there was a dramatic decrease in sales from the third week to the fourth week. What was that decrease? Well, it's simply 200,000. That's how much they made in the third week. And we're going to subtract how much they made in the fourth week, which is 50,000. And that's $150,000, don't forget your dollar sign, decrease. That's pretty significant. So that would be your answer for A. And then for B, the question says, what was the average weekly sales? Okay, we just finished a unit on average. We should be able to do this. This is not difficult. Think back to what we do to find average. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all 4 weeks dollar values and we're going to get a total first to find out, first of all, how much money was made over the 4-week period. And then to find the average, we're going to divide that by the number of weeks. So we can just kind of work somewhere on your whiteboard or sheet of paper. So let's start with the first week. The first week was 100,000. So I'm just going to put total equals 100,000 plus, that was the first week. The second week they made $150,000 plus the third week was $200,000 plus the fourth week was 50,000. Okay. And when I add all of those up, I should get $500,000 is the total amount of money they made for the 4 weeks of the trade fair. But that wasn't the question. The question was, what was the average weekly sales? So the average is going to be the total divided by the number of weeks. So that would be 500,000 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Now, you can go off to the side to do that algorithm. And when you do that, you should find that the average sales for that 4-week period is $125,000. And then we're going to do what we always do when we calculate an average. We're going to check to make sure it's reasonable. Take a look at your average, find your lowest amount, 50,000. It shouldn't be lower than that. Find your highest amount, 200,000. It can't be higher than that. It's not. So 125,000 is reasonable, and that is the average amount in weekly sales for the 4-week period. So these are just some typical types of questions that you're going to be answering as you interpret line graphs showing different types of information. So for homework, for you to work on, you're going to be completing just part of an exercise in your workbook. This is exercise 36, and it begins on page 61. I'm going to have you just complete page 61 and page 62. That's it. That's not the full exercise, and that's okay. I only want you to do because it's 4 pages. We're just going to do 2 this evening or 2 today. So, it's very similar to what we've done here on the video. You're just looking at different types of line graphs, and you're interpreting them, and you're answering different types of questions based on the information. So homework is workbook pages 61 and 62. Okay, bye.